Welcome to Deep Impact Investing with Kimberly Griego-Kiel from Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. In this podcast, we talk about sustainable investing and how your portfolio reflects your values. Do your investments seek accountability from corporations that govern more and more of our society and even the lives we lead? Listen in as we explore the question, are you investing like you give a damn?
Hello and welcome to Deep Impact Investing with Kimberly Griego-Kiel from Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. Today is part 2 of a multi-part series. It's probably going to be about 7 podcasts, so this is really, really exciting to me. This is part 2, and the entire theme of this series is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. They've got a lot of goals, and Kim has given us a breakdown of the first 2 goals already in the last podcast. So go back and listen to that, or the first one in this series. Go back and listen to it, and you'll hear about the first goal, which is by 2030 to have no poverty. And number 2, by 2030, there would be zero hunger, and that's worldwide. So that is amazing to me. We spoke a lot about it. I thought it was a great conversation. And now we're going to get into this 3rd, 4th, and 5th goals. Kim, how are you today?
I'm great, Eric. It's good to be here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this with you. I know that you are a student of this specifically because it's near and dear to your heart, and it's really kind of what you've modeled your practice around, if I'm not mistaken, is a lot of these goals and dreams and aspirations to create a better environment, better world, to make it easier for people to live.
Right, and it's not just us as a firm, but there's a number of sustainable mutual funds who are using these 17 sustainable development goals to focus their investment strategies on. So that's why we want to talk about them, because they're important to a lot of sustainable funds now.
Well, it's a beautiful thing, because that means there's change happening. At least, we hope, right?
We do hope, and a lot of the areas that these goals are focused on, we are seeing some forward progression. So it's important.
Good. All right. And I know we're going to be really getting into goal number 3, 4, and 5, and I'm just going to let you take over and let's talk about them.
Yeah, and so if you have questions, please jump in and ask me. And because we are covering 3, I'm going to kind of move through them pretty quickly. And I just want to remind people that they can go to the United Nations website on this and look at any of the details. So please do that, because I am going to zip through these because we're covering 3 today. So goal number 3 is good health and well-being. And, people are like, well, what does that mean? We all want good health, and how does that fit into sustainability? But in reality, healthy people promote healthy societies. So what the UN really wants is to look at improving the health of the world and of people, and how we look at health reform. We could certainly use a lot of that here in the U.S., but we really want to look at that worldwide. And in the last 2 decades, we have seen a lot of forward movement on that, especially with women and children. But the maternal death rates and the death rate of children has been abysmal. Frankly, we have seen improvement. The childhood death rate for children under 5 has declined. It's gone from, in the year 2000, almost 10 million. The number specifically was 9.8 million. And in 2017, it's almost dropped in half. It's 5.4 million. So this is children under 5, which is a lot.
Yeah.
It's still far too many. Half of those deaths are literally sub-Saharan Africa, by the way. So, there's a lot of work to be done in that area. However, it's both rich and poor countries. So, we have to really focus on that. Literally, one health emergency can push a family or an individual into bankruptcy or poverty. So, we look at the U.S., and one health emergency can push you into bankruptcy. And, just a quick example here, 2 months ago, I had a health emergency, and, we think we have fairly decent health insurance here in the U.S. And if I did not have savings, I have literally hit my maximum out of pocket for the year. And that's $9,000. Wow. So I have spent $9,000 this year on medical care.
Yeah, how many you weren't planning for.
I was not planning for that. Yeah. How many families have that money in savings?
Yeah,
Very few, right?
Yep.
So that could push many people into bankruptcy. But another issue that we're seeing is there are a number of diseases that had very nearly been wiped out. Measles, for example. There is a huge resurgence of these diseases that has come back, and that's because people are not vaccinating their children. I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but we need to continue vaccinating, not just here in developed countries, but in underdeveloped countries as well. These diseases the medical costs can be staggering. Mm-hmm. And these are preventable diseases. We had seen an 80% drop in measles deaths, but it has certainly resurged. Two areas that have stalled in this are diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. So we had seen some improvement, and now it's stalled. So the goals for the UN are to end preventable deaths like malaria, tuberculosis, AIDS, other communicable diseases. We want to strengthen the prevention and treatment of things like substance abuse. We want to achieve universal health coverage to reduce financial risks. Those are just a couple of areas. There's so many more that the UN is looking for. But, if I listed them all, we could be here for 20 minutes just thinking about that. Mm-hmm. How can we help? And I know I said this a lot on the first podcast that we talked about this, but we have to, here in the U.S., work with our legislators to expand healthcare coverage. That is very important to me. It really is amazing how many people have financial difficulties because of a healthcare disaster. Literally $9,000 I have spent this year, and I don't know a lot of people who can afford that. And, we have to hold our leaders and our legislators accountable for these types of things. We do need better healthcare just here in developed countries. We also have to look to underdeveloped countries and how we can help those. Vaccinations, we need to take care of that. We need to deal with, these communicable diseases. Let's talk about the flu. It's preventable. It's a preventable disease. In the 2017-2018 flu season, 80,000 people died in the U.S. alone from the flu.
Yeah,
it's crazy to think about that, right? And according to the World Health Organization, their best estimate is that 650,000 people around the world die each year from the flu, and that's a preventable disease. It's extremely communicable. I mean, think about it. How easy it is. I mean, you touch something and you could potentially pick up the flu. Mm-hmm. And children and the elderly are very susceptible to something like that. And think about our current investment portfolios. If we relate this back to investing, we have to demand more responsible actions from our healthcare providers, our insurance providers. These are publicly traded companies, and technically they're responsible to shareholders. So they also not just shareholder responsibility, but they have a moral obligation. So we need to kind of push them in that right direction.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important because two things come to mind. Number one, your scenario, right? You spent $9,000 out of pocket. You weren't expecting it. That could be detrimental for a tremendous portion of the United States families. And then I think about worldwide. The care that you received for whatever was going on is probably better than most people would be able to receive anywhere else in the world. And so not only is it a financial issue, they might not survive simple things because of the fact they don't have the care that's available. 80,000 people dying in the U.S. because of flu with the level of care that we have here is staggering to me. And, it's that one may not be a huge financial crisis necessarily unless you're in the hospital for a long time. And obviously then we all know what those hospital bills look like when you stay overnight. They're in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, depending on how long you're in there. So there's all sorts of reasons to look at that. And then you brought up a fantastic point that still bothers me to this day is like insulin and EpiPens. Those have been in the news quite a bit in the last couple of years that just, and I'm just going to say, this is my opinion only. This is not reflected from Kim or anybody else on this show, but I 100% believe it's price gouging. They absolutely, there's absolute greed that these companies are, taking advantage of people that need medication. And that just bothers me to no end. And then to think that if they were to actually offer it for a reasonable price, how much more would people that had this on their heart be able to donate to be able to provide those types of vaccinations worldwide? But they can't possibly do it now at $650 a dose or $1,000 a dose for basic medication. There's so many changes that need to be made. And I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. And the pushback that we've seen on that, specifically the EpiPen, there was a lot of pushback on those corporations, and we did see the price drop, but it took a lot of public pressure.
Yeah.
So
and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. It shouldn't be that way.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. So goal number 4, quality education. I'm pretty sure why most people know that quality education matters, or why it matters. But let's look at this in a factual way. Education lifts people out of poverty. That is a fact. When you're educated, you can get a better job. And I'm not talking just about college education. There's a lot of other ways to be educated to get a better job. Have you seen how much a plumber makes? An electrician? Exactly. I mean, it doesn't have to be a college education. According to the UN, it will help achieve a lot of these other sustainable development goals. Simple education. It helps reduce other inequalities. Education empowers people. It does create tolerance. Education does. It contributes to more peaceful societies. Education solves a lot of issues. So part of the problem here is that in areas where there is access to schooling, 80% of children still lack proficiency in reading and math. That's even in some developed countries, but it's especially true in sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia. So, you see a trend here. Sub-Saharan Africa is a huge problem. It's a huge population there. But the estimate is that there are 262 million children who are, on top of this, not even attending school. And guess what?
Wow.
A huge number of those are female. So, addition to that, there's a lack of teacher training, and that is often in developed countries. We're not even, additionally, of course, there's underdeveloped countries. There's a lack of resources, and I'm not just talking about books, but also electricity and water. And as I just mentioned, girls are often barred from education after primary school. Sometimes they can get into primary school, but after that, they're not allowed additional school beyond primary school. And this is typical in some nations, sub-Saharan Africa, some very restrictive Muslim nations. That is true in those extremely restrictive nations. So we have to work on think about Malala and her education push from where she came from. But that is a big problem. So the goals here for the UN Sustainable Development Goals around education is by 2030, they want to ensure that all girls and boys have access to free and equitable primary and secondary education. So that's a basic piece. And then on top of that, they want to see an affordable tertiary education, whether it's a technical school or university. Because again, university is not for everyone. Not everybody wants to go to college. But we do need technical school because, we need mechanics, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need people to do those jobs as well. We need to eliminate the gender disparity in education. So we need girls to be able to go to school, we need them to go to school after primary education, and we need them to get that equitable piece in education. And then we need to increase literacy, so that there is proficiency in reading and math. We need them to be able to read more than a third grade level. There's a big problem here in New Mexico that a lot of children actually are graduating from high school with not much more than a third grade education in reading. And that's just not going to do. So we need to ensure, the UN's goals here also to ensure that learners are acquiring the knowledge to also promote sustainable development. So beyond just getting a basic education, we need to work on sustainability. Because how are we going to survive if we're destroying our planet? So they really also want to work on sustainability with our children. And I think that's a brilliant piece to add into this. And of course, we need to increase our teacher development. I mean, I know a lot of teachers. I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and I believe they do an amazing job. I didn't see this in the goals, but I think we need to pay our teachers more.
Oh yeah, that was going to be seriously. That was going to be one of my points that I brought up after you were speaking about this, because so many of these categories that you've already talked about, the U.S. should be leading the charge on, and it's a complete embarrassment where we're at right now with how much college costs. And then look at I have a few folks that I work with out in California, and I think about what the cost of living is out there, and who wants to be a teacher. Who wants to be a grade school or middle school or high school teacher when they're not going to get paid enough to even be able to rent or never purchase a home, in the area that they live? It's beyond embarrassing. It's ridiculous. And unfortunately, like you said, you stated about New Mexico, kids coming out of high school with a third grade reading level, there has been so much push just to get kids through the school that we don't want people to fail. And I'm going to say blah, 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 because it really it's so frustrating to me. We see it in the professional workplace quite often when we will be receiving applications, resumes with things spelled wrong, words used incorrectly. And it's an embarrassment. These are young people that have already graduated. They think they're equipped for the world, but they have no grasp of basic English, and it doesn't bode well for the future. So, there's so many things that we need to be changing.
Yeah. And this is a goal for the UN, is by 2030, affordable upper level education. And that is very important. So how do we help? And one, we have to get involved. Run for school board if you have the capacity, or volunteer in your local schools. Even once a month, do something, get involved. Not everybody can run for school board. It does take a lot of time, but get involved. Support your local schools and your teachers. They are extremely overwhelmed. As I mentioned, I know a lot of teachers and they're exhausted. School boards, states are asking more and more of our teachers, and they don't have the time. A lot of people say, oh, teachers get summers off. No, actually, they really don't. They're doing retraining. A lot of them have to work during the summer just to make ends meet because we don't pay them, which brings me to my next point. We need to fund our schools better. Yeah. So we do need to speak to local representatives. We need to ask them to support our schools with more financial support, and we need better buildings. We need to provide more supplies. There's just a lot more things that we need to do. And I'm just talking about here in the U.S. And on top of that, we need to encourage the private sector to invest in the development of our educational facilities and our schools. After all, as you just mentioned, it's our future workforce. And if they want a better future workforce, then they should invest in that. Otherwise, they're not going to get it. Yeah. So what do we do internationally? We need to encourage NGOs to partner with youth organizations, with international organizations, to help educate that future as well. Internationally, there's a lot that can be done. We need to work with those organizations to educate female students, and we need to help them as well. Because, again, sub-Saharan Africa is not getting educated, and they need to be educated as well, because this is a global issue, not just a U.S. issue. And on top of this, I want to mention, when we're talking with other organizations, when we're talking with the private sector, and when we're talking about this with our legislators and our local or state representatives, we have to make sure that we're including and mentioning the most vulnerable and the marginalized groups of this cohort in our conversations. Let's not forget them. So these are all very important pieces.
Well, and the last piece that I would say is that I think we're coming into an era right now where we can actually have a huge, huge impact on this just with the advancements in technology. There's no reason that, you can't have virtual classrooms for those areas that maybe we can't get a teacher to. You have people that organize and help the students to have, get in their seats and be ready for, class, even if the teacher is not present in the building, because the teacher is 2 or 3 towns away, right? Or 200 or 300 miles away. but they're part of a virtual classroom, and they can still get an education. And there's just no reason. There really is no reason that this is being held back so much. So,
yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'm
No,
not trying to be depressing on this, but there's so many things that can be done.
Yes, and education can really change the world.
Absolutely.
So it's very, very important. Goal number 5 is a big passion of mine. It's gender equality. Mm-hmm. It's such a big topic. We could literally talk about it for an hour, but
easily.
I will. Yeah, I'm going to kind of skim the surface here because it can be so emotional, and it can be. We could really do a deep dive in this, but I literally am going to skim the surface. Gender equality is it's a fundamental human right, and it's a necessary foundation for. And this is what the UN says: it's a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. And that is what the UN says. I mean, I truly believe that. Yet, 49 countries have no laws that protect women from domestic violence. 49 countries.
Yeah.
And there's a number of U.S. states that actually don't have laws.
Seriously?
Seriously. The statistics I could quote can be really depressing, and I'm not going to go there.
I'm already getting aggravated.
Yes. So what we want, I'm a woman, so I'm saying what we want is to have equal access to education, healthcare, work, and representation in the political and economic decision making. And we're not there yet. I mean, if we look at if you look in the political arena, we don't have that. It's just simply not there. I just mentioned in education, right? How many women are not being educated. And what the UN says we need to do is we need to eradicate the harmful practices that target women in the workplace. We need to end child marriage. We need to end female genital mutilation. That is still going on. We do need to have more women involved in the political process. All of these things will help fuel sustainable economies, and they will benefit humanity if there's more equality. I mean, literally, why does this matter? I mean, women are half of the world's population. They're not quite half of the workforce, but it's nearly half the workforce. They're underrepresented in government, in corporate leadership. They're chronically underpaid. I mean, we've heard the statistics before about how long a woman has to work before, during the course of a year before they even get close to, half of the pay that men get. They receive substandard health care. They're more often victims of domestic violence and sexual violence. They have less access to education. If we can advance gender equality, we will increase the levels of education to everyone. We will decrease violence. We'll increase healthcare for everyone. If women are getting healthcare, their children are getting healthcare, and that's both male and female. It's really a win-win situation for everyone. Everyone gets better when we support women.
Yeah, I agree.
Children, yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So what are the goals of the UN and their, and this particular goal? And there's a lot of them. So I kind of focused it down to just a couple. We want to end all forms of gender discrimination. We want to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. We want to eliminate the harmful practices like child marriage and female genital mutilation. We want to ensure that there's full and effective participation and equal access to leadership and decision-making in the political process, in the economic process, and in public life, and ensure universal access to healthcare and reproductive healthcare. Both of those pieces are very important. So that's all important. And, here in the sustainable investment world that I live in, if you are invested in any sustainable mutual fund, there's a lot of shareholder actions around gender equality. This is a huge component of what the sustainable investment and the impact investment world is doing. It's really powerful. It's really amazing, powerful stuff. I am super passionate about this topic, and we've touched on it a few times. I really hope that sometime in the near future, we'll do a podcast just on this topic. So I hope everyone will stay tuned and listen for an exciting podcast on just that topic. Because like I said, we could really go in a deep dive on that. But those are goals 3, 4, and 5. And we will continue to talk about these because I think we mentioned there's 17 of them. And over the course of the next year, we will touch on all of them at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to close with one thing here about this last topic. Kim, you have not had the pleasure to meet my wife, and my wife has not had the pleasure of meeting you. But you are two women that are both brilliant. My wife is absolutely brilliant in what she does and the work that she does with Boys Town here in Nebraska. And you are brilliant as well. And just learning more and more about sustainable investing and our conversations. This is what makes me think. And I'll boast also, my daughter is also brilliant. And she gets a lot of that from her mother.
You better add that in.
Yeah, exactly. No, but she really, really is. She's bright and so smart. And I look at them and we're so blessed to be in the United States. We're so blessed to have a lot of opportunity, even though it's still not equal. But I think about all of the brilliant inventions, all of the brilliant ideas that are not going to come to fruition because we're not allowing those young ladies to live a full life with education and all those ideas and all those fixes, right, for the future that we've talked about. There's somebody out there that has the absolute answer for so many things, and yet we may not allow them to bring us those answers because their mind isn't going to be developed by just having a basic education and beyond. And that's heartbreaking because we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're, in a lot of ways, and obviously it's not necessarily all the United States. It's mainly other countries. However, we still play a part in that. And I think it's so important that you've brought this conversation to the forefront. And I thank you for that because I'm getting a ton out of this entire series. And I hope everybody goes back and listens to the first one and then joins us for the rest of them as well.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate the compliment, and I hope your wife listens to this and hears it as well.
Brownie points for me. Yay!
Yes.
See, I'm brilliant too. I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
No, but seriously, I mean that with the utmost respect. I love meeting with you every time we do a podcast and just learning from you. So again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I'm very much enjoying doing this, and I'm super passionate about the impact investing and sharing the good word around all of this. It's a joy. I love what I do.
Absolutely. All right. And audience, I want to thank you for listening to the Deep Impact Investing Podcast with Kimberly Griego-Kiel. It's important that you're listening to this, and it's important that you subscribe. So please click the subscribe now button below, because when Kim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And this will make it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And that's our hope. Our goal is that you're going to help us spread this message, because the things that she's talking about and bringing up on these podcasts are vital, and they're important to just about every one of us that's out there listening today. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Deep Impact Investing Podcast, the sustainable, responsible impact investing podcast that shows you how to get your voice heard. It's time to start investing like you give a damn. To ask a question that we can answer on an upcoming podcast, email us at info@horizonssfs.com or join the conversation on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Horizons Sustainable Financial Services, or give us a call at 505-982-9661. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available. The companies we may speak about during our podcast are not recommendations for investment only. You and your financial advisor can determine what the right investments are for you and your situation. Horizon Sustainable Financial Services is a registered investment advisor, registered with the state of New Mexico and other jurisdictions were registered or exempted. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the host and or guest and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.